The Jim Crow laws segregated white and black people in almost every aspect of life. They were segregated at drinking fountains, movie theaters, schools, transportation, restaurants, and more. The first step in their creation was in 1877 when a compromise removed troops from the South. In the election of 1912, when Woodrow Wilson became president, he appointed Southerners to work for him, and they began to push to segregated workplaces. Because it wasn't slavery, laws were passed in multiple states that segregated multiple areas of life. These laws were created because Wilson said that it was the best interest for black and European Americans. But this was clearly incorrect. Jim Crow was not a real person. He was a fictitious person in a play. But the play was racist, and this is how it became the name for these laws. When the laws were starting out, they segregated government jobs, and then it kept on spreading. The Jim Crow laws violated many rights of black Americans. By keeping them separate, they didn't have the best conditions and they didn't interact as much with other people. Like I said before, these laws were said to be in the best interest of all people, but black people still didn't agree with them. The Scottsboro boys got into trouble because they were riding in the back of a train with a bunch of people, black and white, when a white boy stepped on one of the Scottsboro boys' hands and a rock-throwing fight broke out. The boys with the two white girls jumped out, but the Scottsboro boys stopped the girls from jumping out because the train was beginning to move at high speeds. After the girls got off the train, they told the police that the Scottsboro boys raped them so that they could get back at them for the fight. The Scottsboro boys were 9 African American teenagers, 13 to 19, accused of raping 2 white girls in Alabama. These cases, while dealing with rape, also dealt with racism and the right to a fair trial. This case included a lynch mob before they were indicted, an all-white jury, rushed trials, and disruptive mobs. The alleged day the crimes were committed was the 25th of March, 1931. Though all 9 of the teens ended up being released after an average of 10 years in prison, they had faced death sentences from false accusations, no fair trial, and being hung by a lynch mob. The Scottsboro case's impact on the capital punishment was that people saw how easily it could be given out, and how cruel it was to give children it. Even though the Scottsboros never received it, people outside of the South saw what horrors a false accusation could bring. As stated before, this obviously wasn't a fair trial. The jury was all white in the Alabama trials, so the jury was definitely not impartial. The 2 accusers were both lying about the case. Also, the Scottsboros were not given a lawyer until right before the trials. Luckily for the boys, the judge of the first trial called for a retrial, which led to the case being appealed to the Supreme Court. Otherwise, 8 of the 9 boys would have been killed in an execution. The Scottsboro case showed that people were willing to come up with false accusations in order to make African Americans' lives worse, and juries were partial to whites. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old African American who was lynched in 1955 for offending a white woman in a grocery store. This small event goes to show how racist some people were in the South during the 20th century.
Hello, darkness, my old